Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 26, Episode 8 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
I'm Pooja.
And I'm Tappy.
And the 50 billionth annual Renaissance Pleasure Fair is going to start in a month, and we start building tomorrow.
Yay!
Hi.
Yes. There's like, 2 or 3 more of my games, and then I will disappear from GMing for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then if you come out and see your shadow,
then fair goes for 2 months.
All right.
In this episode, Axel writes in about systems you can't get to work. Mr. CJ, or MRCJ, sends us an email about music and campaign inspiration, specifically about my comments about Rush. And Davio sends us a horror story. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We have a forum, happyjacksforum.com, and we're on the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, MeWe, happyjacksrpg, all one word. That's happyjacksrpg, all one word. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can watch it on Friday nights at 7:14 p.m. Pacific Time, which will soon be Pacific Standard Time starting next week, at happyjacks.org/live. And
Pacific non-standard time.
Pacific non-standard time. I wish they'd just leave it at daylight savings time. And Kimmy's Kickstarter ended, and she was like 500% or something like that of her intended goal. So congratulations for that.
Yay!
And I'm sure she would like to thank everyone. I'm sure she already has, but I'm sure she'd like to thank everyone who backed it. Systems you can't get to work, from Axel. Dear Happy Jack's crew, the tabletop RPG world has seen many new great systems in the past few years, and many of the quote-unquote big names have undergone substantial and often successful revisions. In our group, we like trying new systems, especially those that seem to be well-liked and successful. Some of these we discovered through your APs, so thanks for sharing your experiences. However, the one system we could not make work is Fate. Oh, we're going to get a lot of emails about this next week. The rules just wouldn't go away. This gets back to the great crunch debate of 2011, maybe.
I only remember like a good fifth of that.
That's a lot to remember about a debate from 9 years ago.
No. I was very drunk.
That was when we had a 3-hour show, and we would consume an enormous amount of beer during the course of the show.
It was a significant debate, though.
It was. It was yelly. The rules just wouldn't go away. We couldn't get into the flow and quote-unquote the create advantage and succeed at a cost mechanics felt cumbersome, and constantly having to come up with functioning aspects was wearing us down. This felt strange since we have been able to have fun with practically all systems we've tried. We all have 25 plus years of tabletop RPG experience, and we're as much a fan of crunchy systems as we are of simple mechanic hippie games. Fate is the only exception. We've given it a try. It just won't work for us. Do any of you have similar experiences, a supposedly quote-unquote good game system that just didn't work for you? Any ideas why? Keep up the good show, and please finally find and get rid of that one dodgy microphone that makes the person using it sound so squeaky. I believe that microphone is gone.
Fingers
I believe.
crossed.
If it isn't, let me know. But I think we got rid of it.
I think we took it out back and shot it.
This email is months old. So, Axel from the UK.
I have opinions.
Okay.
I've had the exactly same experience with Fate. I mean, the great crunch debate started, as I recall, when I said, well, I think Fate is a very crunchy game.
Right.
And Fate is a game that you can be good at playing. Like, you get practice in making aspects, or what aspects are useful aspects. And
like Pathfinder or D&D 3.5. People get really good at taking the different parts and synthesizing a new thing that you can...
Right. And so, like, coming up with stuff on the fly, I think if you get really into Fate, it can be fun, but I had exactly the same experience. Like, I was constantly thinking about the mechanics and not role-playing.
Right. I've noticed that, too. I have not played Fate Pure, but I've played a Fate-ish system, and I found myself staring at my character sheet a lot, trying to figure out what to do. I do that a lot with systems I'm unfamiliar with anyway, but that one in particular, it's like, what can which one of my aspects is going to be applicable now? You know what I mean? I would say, in Fate's defense, the rules might become a little more, or a little less in your face the longer you played it.
Right.
I would think.
That's
probably like most games.
Yeah.
You tend to, like, as you get more and more comfortable and things stop being like a, oh crap, what do I do now?
Right.
Versus that's when a flow really works. But there are some systems that are just like, that hurdle is too big.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't like GURPS. I played GURPS since, 1984, 1985, all the way through the mid-90s. We got to the point where all of us at the table, it was basically the same group of people for that whole time playing various campaigns, got to the point where we all knew the rules cold, and we didn't have to stop and look in a book, because we just all knew them. So, and that got to the point where we were having a blast. And there's too many rules, but...
I mean, yeah, it's like what the barrier is to entry. It's kind of the barrier to fun.
It is.
That if there's so much stuff that you have to look up, like, if there's not a baseline, and that goes, in some ways it just goes back to crunchiness, I think. But I think a system can be crunchy and intuitive. And
Yes.
if your system is both crunchy and non-intuitive, or whatever the fuck the opposite of intuitive is. Excuse my language.
Obtuse? No, it wouldn't be obtuse. I don't know.
I think lots of older systems definitely are like that, where they're just crunchy, and why are we even doing this? Like, Traveller, like, I think like 2nd edition Traveller, had a diagram for your sailboat on where you could point into the wind. Like, what the fuck? This is a spaceship game, and you have a sailboat diagram?
Like, please no.
No. There's Twilight 2000, where I believe it's been a while since I played Twilight 2000, but we put that away almost immediately when we had to use the square root button to figure out grenade deviation.
Nope.
Nope. We're not doing that one.
If I have to break out my TI-82,
yeah,
the answer is no.
So, I mean, a lot of the old systems, like, there was this kind of, like, march towards an attempt at reality. And then, like, one of the big turnarounds is when we started getting, like, the dice pool type mechanics. When we started getting, like, vampire, etc. And the vampire's like, we're magic vampires that do crazy magic vampire things. And 5 dice is, you can do a handstand and juggle 5 knives with your toes. That's a dexterity 5. And they just kind of, like, went with numbers and just went for it, as opposed to, oh my gosh, there's Cyberpunk 2020. That's another one where it really got in its own way with, like, mechanics that don't work. And then they created an entirely new book only for, like, gun combat, where it was almost like the thing where it's like Fatal's like the most like accurate whatever. Right. This was supposed to be the most accurate way, based on real combat statistics, to do actual combat. And it's like, guys, you have like 70 pages here.
If I wanted to do actual combat, I would have taken up that offer to join the armed forces.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, older systems. If you just try and legacy systems, you go, wow, now I really see why we have all of these new ways of doing things.
I think now he's asking specifically about other systems that we've had similar problems with, but I think one of the things that especially gamers who've been gaming for a long time and are used to the older games. And Fate is based on Fudge, which has been around for, since the 90s, I think. Maybe it's been around for a long time. But it was kind of that attempt to make a game that gamified language, almost. You know what I mean? And I don't think they quite hit the mark with it. But it's that whole idea where the mechanics will magically sort of disappear, and you're just sitting around the table telling the story within the constraints of the system. Once everyone has that kind of wrapped around their head. But it's a big departure for people who are used to regular, traditional RPGs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, that it relies on narrative a lot to create aspects and things like that.
It also requires all the players to create narrative for those aspects and stuff. And it, like, when you're in, like, you're at a dinner party or something, and you're like, ha ha ha, I want to create an aspect. All right, what aspect are you going to do? I don't know, what's a dinner party aspect? Like, I want to kind of do this sort of thing, but I don't know the words for it. And it's just really easy to get stopped up into that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of games that have tried to do that gamifying narrative, like using words as their system. And there was one that they tried for Neverwhere. It was a very small system, but it was like, you come up with these adjectives for yourself. If those adjectives apply, you get a +1 to your roll. And so if you have like 3 adjectives apply, you get +3 to your roll. Go. It's cool, but it also, like...
That's real easy for a munchkin to game that, too.
And it's also really easy for you to get left out in the cold accidentally.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Right, where you're like, oh, I'll make my character, and then it's like nothing fucking applies.
Yeah, that's where, like, you have to lean heavily into, like, the GM creating scenarios that work for everyone at the table.
Right.
And, like, it's real easy to overlook a character that seems really interesting on paper, but doesn't necessarily jive with what everybody else has put down. And then that happens 2 or 3 times, and suddenly you've got one person who's just not playing.
And it's hard for a GM to know the 48 adjectives that his 4 players are using.
Yeah.
You know, so it's... I can, again, like, I can appreciate it, but exactly like you said, it's real easy for one person to just get left behind.
Does anyone have a system they've tried that just is like, no, this is not working?
I want to say, like, there was a game, we didn't get very far into it, hence why the name is just... I think it was Scion.
Is that a White Wolf?
That's a White Wolf game.
Yeah.
It was like old White Wolf where you're all like psychics and there's like alien beasts. No, superpower. They're like.
I thought it was like another pantheon based like gods. So maybe it wasn't Scion.
Oh no! Oh
I'm
yes,
just
yes it is. Yes. I was thinking of something else.
My gaming group bounced hard off of that one really early on, but that's where it comes into like. We just couldn't get through sessions without spending 50% of them referencing something in the book that would then send you to another page in that paragraph, and that would reference something else. It was like this, like, fucking onion of like, back and forth cross-indexing.
Right.
And it's like, you shouldn't have to cross-index in your RPG manual. Like, ever. But if so, like, very, very rarely. Where if you're like, cool, every single class has at least, like, multiple abilities that force you to cross-index multiple times. Nope, we noped out.
Yeah.
It was just, like, I can't remember, like, it was like holding, like, a choose-your-own-adventure book when you wanted to remember the last place that you were, except, like... You needed to remember 3 times ago.
Oh, and you can't use your finger to, like, hold it.
Like, you kind of can if you, like, do this weird claw thing. I had a whole system down. I also ended up doing a thing where I was like, man, I never get, like, the ending I want. So after I had gone through the book a few times, I would find the ending I wanted, and then find the choices that would reference that page, and I would go through the adventure backwards.
Fair enough.
So I'm just saying, indexing is something as I understand. have a history of it.
One system for me that really didn't work was the new L5R.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know it at all.
Well, I never played the full blown version of it, but the beta, and part of that was because of the fact that there was an errata sheet, and you couldn't really trust what you were reading, that it was the actual rules. But I mean, there's so many things in it that were just like very much not what you would expect from L5R. And I mean, I had a similar problem with the new Star Wars games, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games.
Which is also the same problem as Fate, where you just have to come up with bullshit. Like, the systems say, make something up right now.
Right. It's like,
well,
oh, you failed, but you got a triumph. So your failure resulted in something great happening to you. Okay, well, it was a perception roll. You found $1? I don't know. I mean, it's so many...
$20 bill flies down from the sky.
Oh, look! There's my car keys. But I mean, putting that kind of, especially when it's mandatory, it's like. Now, the nice thing about the FFG Star Wars is there was always the default. Someone gets some good thing happens as a result of their roll. You can just throw one of those light blue dice, and that goes to whoever's next in the initiative order. So the next person who's going to roll just gets like a little tiny bonus to it, which I ended up using a lot. Mm-hmm. But there's things about that game that seemed really cool, and I really wanted to like it. But I mean, once you start getting into the weeds of like equipment modifications, and it just starts to become very cumbersome and very fiddly. And it's like, are we playing a role-playing game, or are we playing resource management simulation? Because at some point it turns into that, at least for me. And of course, D&D above like 8th level, for me at least, combat becomes too cumbersome and too long. So, I mean, I'll play... I don't mind running D&D, but I would not want to run it, like, 10th level or higher. Like, no.
Yeah.
And then you end up hitting that steep curve where it's like, okay, well, it's super, super cumbersome, and you're going to spend 4 hours in one combat, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, your sorcerer just... and it's done.
Right.
It's like you hit that kind of, like, cutoff where suddenly it's like one person gets one turn, and... everything is dead.
Right. Oh, yeah. Especially when you get to real high levels and people are taking multiple actions per turn. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. But then it's just boring for everyone. Except that one person who gets their moment of glory, and it's like, cool, that was 20 minutes where no one else got to participate in literally anything. Fun times, loot the body, move on.
Right. Anything that doesn't work or hasn't worked that you've tried that you're like, no, this is not going to work?
Well, Hero. And that's just because of how my brain works. Because my brain, if it says make up anything you want, I will.
Right.
And I'll make up all of the shit that works together. And then I'm going to do the things that I want to do too well. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or I can just take the most basic things in that game, and then it's like, okay, well, I mean, I don't really do anything now. But like finding a middle place just with how my brain works, because this is now a puzzle. I want to solve this puzzle.
And that's you can really break Hero.
Yeah, well, I did. that one game. And that right there is when I was like, this Hero's not for me.
Right.
And I tried a few more times, but making characters where it's like, hey, here's your points, but you can do all this fiddly stuff in here, anything you want. I've learned that I need like some choices that somebody gives me. I can't just make shit up myself, because if I do, then I'll end up really hyper focusing on one thing, and then probably miss out on a lot of the game.
Right.
And then when I am good at the thing, everybody else is like, "Well, I'm gonna go outside and have a cigarette. I'll catch you when you're done."
The earlier versions of Champions, the superhero version of Hero, I think we played 2nd edition. Much more. It's like there was maybe a dozen powers or so, and it's like, and he didn't have enough points to like, and a lot of the stuff wasn't quite as complex yet. Still had a bunch of stats and all that stuff, but I seem to recall back then that game was more playable. At least it seemed that way. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's fondness of bygone eras, but it...
Come on, nostalgia glasses are the best glasses.
That's true.
Well, I mean, like the 5th edition hero book, I mean, you could kill somebody with that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see a strong man try and rip that open.
I've got
That's
I have the 6th edition, and one of them fell off of a table, and it's
the
so
floor?
heavy. No, it exploded the binding. It was so much.
That's not nearly as fun as
No.
my version.
It was, and I had to do a shit job putting it back together. But they use really heavy paper. It's probably like 24 pound, maybe even heavier than that. Beautifully printed book, but it was like that thick. It's 2 books that you need for the core rules of the game. One is that thick, and the other one is that thick. And
So there's one 2.5-inch book and one 2 3/8 inch book.
it's about total of about 1,200 pages.
Oh fuck no!
yeah. I think if a book's more than 350, I'm going to look at it sideways. You're like,
Right.
I don't know if you're.
I mean, part of what made like when Traveler got so bloated and all the splats and everything. Like I played a campaign of not Traveler. I'm sorry, Pathfinder. I played a game of Pathfinder that we used. Anything was on the table. All the splats were on the table. So like, but we used the online database, and you could just search stuff,
Right.
and it was at your fingertips in moments. And I was like, every system needs this.
That's why I like PDFs. I can search a PDF. Like I am honestly like over like actual held books when it comes to RPGs. Just because I can have all of them with me whenever I want, but also just being searchable
Yeah.
really changed the game.
They're asking in the chat room about V5 Vampire, and they're asking about the hunger.
Dope as fuck!
Oh yeah,
It's great.
I love it.
Like, I mean, the fact that it's just such a, to me, it's easy and intuitive.
Yeah, I agree. Especially the hunger mechanic. You don't have to worry about counting how much blood points you've used. It's like you make a roll. If you succeed on the roll, then you don't have to take a hunger die. And if you fail on it, you take a hunger die. You still do what you did.
And there's still a lot of like hidden structure in it, where it tells you like what kind of thing is happening with the action that you took. Like if it's like the failure or the like too good of a success, you monster. And I find it's easier to jump off of that because it's a little bit more. It's like a tweak of what you're doing,
Right.
as opposed to something else good happens.
Right.
I see a butterfly and I am impressed.
See,
I don't know.
that's the thing. Because we've had a couple of either
We've had,
messy
I think, a
successes.
couple of messy successes, and one bestial failure, I want to say.
Yeah. But I like the guidelines for it. It's like you breach the masquerade, or I don't remember what the other ones are. There's like 3 or 4 things. It's like here's like when this comes up on the hunger dice, here's whatever happens. It should be one of these 3. And
I
we
think one of them is like you have to take a stain, like you've gone against one of your tenants,
Right.
Stuff like that.
and then also you can lose a background, a dot of background or something.
Yes, you can lose a dot of one of your advantages if it makes sense to
Yeah.
the scene. One of the things I like about how that works with Tremere is like with my spell casting. It's like because I have to make a rouse check for everything, but my spell works whether or not I fail the rouse check.
Right.
It's the spell casting check and then if it's an opposed roll. So like it's still just slightly clunky on that end, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. And like also Stu made it a little bit easier on me. There are a lot of like specific requirements in the book
It's really
about
time requirements.
It is like they've added in a lot of time requirements for spells that like don't make a lot of sense. It's like if I wanted to make like normally and in the course of our game, like say for the Bloodstone, because I have a tracking
Right.
spell, but in the game it costs 4 days of time before you can even make your first roll to see if you made it, and then you like that's lost time if you didn't. Also, then it's only good for a week. I'm totally cool with it being only good for a week, but, like, it takes 4 days to make.
Well, that's probably them trying to slow down the Tremere, because Tremere murdered everything in all of the previous editions.
Right.
True. They were super OP, but at the same time, it's like there's that middle road. It's like we're always talking about how Celerity got so nerfed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very nerfed.
Well, yeah, because in the edition, the White Wolf the new whatever, World of Darkness, Celerity just murdered everything. Like, I gave them to some... I was like, oh, we have some vampires. Of course they have Celerity. Oh, shit.
Right. But the thing about that sort of bestial failure or messy success that I like is it gives you just like a few guidelines, and then you can sit down. Okay, what were you doing? Does one of these apply? Oh yeah, sure. And then you can just sit and figure it out. And it's not like just pull something out of your ass, which it's like don't. It was a perception roll. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't make me do that.
The best is when you fail a feeding roll, or not fail, but have the hunger die come up.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It's exciting because everyone's got one almost all the time, and it's
Yeah.
like, don't forget your hunger die.
Stu's favorite thing to say.
It
Do
is.
you have your what was on your hunger dice? Did you? Is that another 10? It's like nope. No, it wasn't. Sorry. I hate to
Right.
disappoint you constantly.
There's one more I want to mention very briefly because I haven't played it enough, but there is the Shadowrun Anarchy system. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
It's much more narrative. There's actually, like, you can have points you can spend to take over narrative control from the GM, which is one thing I personally don't like, but I know a lot of people do. And that's one of the things that kind of on me. But also, like, your job in combat is apparently to build up edge points, which then you spend to destroy, like, everything. So it's kind of like you spend a few rounds, like, trying to get these points up, so that you can then spend them to have a huge dice bowl and wreck somebody.
That sounds fatey.
Yeah, kind of.
You're trying to put a bunch of aspects on something so you can beat the crap out of it.
Yeah, but instead of like aspects, it's just dice rolls that
Right.
give you these points of edge. Didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
I need to give it a few more shots, I think. But if any of you guys have played it,
What was it called?
it's Anarchy, the Shadowrun Anarchy system.
Oh, okay.
Because 5th and 6th edition are so crunchy now that there was a kind of pushback. Hey, let's try this one. It's very hippie game.
Now,
But
is that
also,
like sort of an alternate product they've come out with, or is that okay?
so yeah, it's for the hippie gamers.
Got it.
But it's also one where like the mechanics of it just didn't jive with me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Axel, for the thought-provoking email. And next we go on to. I didn't put the title. What was it? Oh, this was MRCJ, Mr. CJ, about music and inspiration. Who would like to read the music and inspiration one?
I will.
Okay.
Sorry. Did you want
No, I said not it.
Oh, okay. Hello, balanced bacteria, boys and girls. After listening to your not very good discussion of the death of Neil Peart? Peart? You say that.
They're probably yelling at you right now. I've heard most people I've heard it pronounced Peart, but I've also heard other people pronounce it Peart. I don't know if that is that. I thought it had an I in it. I'll look it up.
Well,
Peart?
for now it's Peart. The death of Neil Peart, I thought back to the role of music generally, and rush music, when I start the process of world building for a new game. For me, I start making notes by hand or in Word.
No, he spelled it right. I'm sorry. Sorry for interrupting.
Most of the time, in the background is a soundtrack. It helps me maintain tone over time. Generally, I can't create the whole thing in 1 or 2 sittings, so it's a way to try to keep in that headspace from start to finish. I have also taken elements of the music itself, or ideas around it, and put them in the games itself. Games themselves. Whatever. What follows is a brief, geeky, let me tell you about my character, but these aren't characters. I had 2 games that sprang from Rush's music. The song I should not have taken this email. Red Barchetta was instrumental in creating a game set in the near future where a dictatorship's motor law restricted internal combustion engines and players were exotic car-driving rebels. The song Early Distant Warning helped me with a post-apocalyptic mashup with Samuel 1 and 2 from the Bible. I ran a Messiah story set in post-nuclear Nebraska with the players taking the part of David and his brothers. Close to the Edge by Yes helped spawn a world that closely resembled a Roger Dean album cover, complete with variable gravity and not a world so much as a series of linked ideas with land bridges and routes and other ways to travel between. Now that sounds awesome. The instrumental side B of Wang Chung's Live and Die in LA soundtrack provided both the tone and background soundtrack during play for a superhero campaign. I stole images from Madonna's, I know, weird, Madonna, bedtime story official music video. The game was kind of a mashup between Madonna's video and Gene Wolfe's Sword of the Lictor. I'm trying to imagine how that would work. Halfway through making the world, I switched over to David Sylvain's album Plight and Premonition, and also used that as a soundtrack during play. Anyway, enough of that. I don't have a warehouse on the East Coast where I keep extra ideas, so I get them where I can. It's interesting to me how anything can trigger them, then boom, and I have to keep up. Mr. CJ, P.S.
Those are definitely all words.
I'm trying to think if I've ever, had a music or a song inspire a session or a campaign, and I don't know if I have.
I can't listen to music and write because I'm ADD as fuck, and I'll just listen to the music or I'll ignore the music and write.
Right.
I usually have something going in the background, but I'm much more likely to be inspired by a novel or a short story or something like that, where I want to take all the really cool elements and ditch all the bullshit stuff, make that into something else, than I am, it's something, I'm coming up on possibly doing a mini campaign, and I finally found my inspo.
Oh, excellent.
And it came from a series of books that started off really, really great, and quickly devolved into, "The fuck are you doing? Holy hell, how dare you? Oh, dear Lord, I'm not finishing these. I'm looking up the ending on the Wikipedia." But I liked the basic premise with some significant changes. Mm-hmm. So I've got all of that, and then it's trying to figure out what system it would work in and blah blah blah. But in terms of tone, that makes perfect sense to me, especially when it comes to movie scores rather than soundtracks, because words interfere. But something like the Miramax soundtrack score, if you haven't seen that movie, oh god, please watch it. It's amazing. But the score is amazing, and it's got this whole ethereal, otherworldly business going on. So I can see that setting a tone for short stories that I've written, and then the original soundtracks to Bastion and Transistor too. But those both, there's very much a lack of words in all of those things, because I can't have words competing with my words.
Right. Like I said, no music. There was a novel I read. It was given to me as a gift by one of the Boggarts years ago. Probably 15, 20 years ago, called The Drawing of the Dark. And it was sort of I remember almost nothing about this book, except that there was a brewing vessel. It was about beer saving the world. And there was a brewing vessel that had been in this place for an extremely long time, and buried underneath it was the bones of King Arthur or something. And so the beer it made, especially when you got near the very bottom of the mash tun or whatever kind of vessel this was, imbued someone with some sort of powers, and something happened, and it was supernatural that involved drinking this beer. And I remember reading the book and enjoying it very much, but I don't remember anything about it because it was probably almost 20 years ago. But I wrote a Boggart song called The Drawing of the Dark that was inspired by that. Reading the lyrics to that might sort of jog my memory as to what happened in the book. But I came up with a setting where that was just sort of like very loosely inspired on this, where it's a post-apocalyptic setting where civilization basically collapsed and it came back to sort of an agrarian economy. And the only people who had any power or influence were those very few people remaining who could brew beer and make other spirits. And like they were called ale kings. And I actually had a whole setting. Never ran it. But they basically had possessed the secret knowledge on what you need to know to make beer. Like their holy relics would be like a thermometer, because no one has the thermometers anymore because they all broke. Because you have to have a thermometer if you're gonna have the mash at the right temperature to make good balanced. Because I used to be homebrew, but that's about as close as it gets. But I honestly can't remember a goddamn thing about that book, except that there was someone buried underneath, and I think it might have been King Arthur or Merlin or something like that, underneath the fermentation vessel. When you think about it, it's kind of gross. Because it wasn't like there's a metal thing and then they use underneath it. It's like this thing is like on the dirt, and yeah. So you're actually getting ancient corpse juice, I guess, in it. I don't know.
And
No.
and that's gross.
Yes, it is. It's extremely gross. But apparently that's how you get the power necessary to somehow save the world, I think.
By drinking the dead King Arthur body juice. Cool.
Yeah.
Good to know. World could go fuck itself.
Right. Yeah.
Man, I have gotten potty mouth today.
There's I don't know, like songs don't really do it. Sometimes, I mean, books and stuff or shows will sometimes give me a hey. I'm watching The Expanse right now, and the Martians on the Martian surface. Like, hey, it's like gravity is less there, so even if you'd have to be pretty heavy just to get like good purchase, but also you're still falling at a different rate. So if you had people inside like domes and stuff, it'd still be kind of like weird to get around. Like I went to space camp when I was a kid because I was a nerd, and we used the lunar simulator, what it's like to walk on the moon, and it's fucking hard.
Is it underwater?
No, it's this giant spring attached to the ceiling,
okay.
And it makes you 1/6 your weight, and so you try and take a step forward, and then you're 4 feet in the air. And so I was like, okay, well, what if human bodies were like 600 pounds? What if, and then it goes to the, like, you could have these cool cybernetic bodies with muscles that are 3D printed onto it and then do a kind of cortical stack thing into the back of the head, and this is how Martians live. Because otherwise, you're just not suited for life, even in the habitation things. Then it turned into this whole cyberpunk bullshit of, well, who owns the bodies, and are these bodies mass-produced? They're not doing one-offs, so it's kind of like buying a car, but your car is your body, so you get like a Toyota Corolla. There are a whole bunch of other people who look just like you. Maybe they got different eye color on their version, or maybe they decided to have like different texture hair. But so what does personal mean? Are there aftermarket parts for bodies? Like, what do we do?
100% there are aftermarket parts for bodies.
And so then with the whole like control, like you'd have to have system identification numbers for everybody, because you need to be able to log how much of all the resources people are using, because you're on fucking Mars. And then it goes to industrial control and starts getting into this whole dystopian cyberpunk bullshit. And all of that starts with, hey, it's kind of shitty to walk on Mars. And that's right. How my brain goes. And so, like, songs are cool and can like definitely give a feeling to a game, but I don't usually get inspiration from them.
I've written songs that were inspired by role-playing games, but I don't think I've gone the other way. S. Britcher is asking if you are aware of Eclipse Phase, because that does sound very familiar to Eclipse Phase.
Oh yes, I am
That's
familiar with
Eclipse
Phase.
And, yeah. Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, have you seen what's it called? Altered Carbon?
You know what? I rage quit after 6 episodes because the GM was letting the players do dumb shit and not actually punishing them for it, and I just couldn't do it. It's like, fuck this show. This is dumb. I love these characters, I love the setting, but the story that's happening right here is just fucking stupid, and I just bailed. Maybe it gets better later on, but I couldn't do it.
It took me 3 times to finish the first season, and I only finished it because the second season came out. So I watched the second season.
Now,
I enjoyed it.
The role-playing game that's coming out, 2 of my friends are in it as models. So
they're making
it.
Altered Carbon RPG? Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Cool.
I think the Kickstarter just ended.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, yeah. Thank you, Mr. CJ or MRCJ. And I'm sure you've corrected us on how that is to be pronounced. I'm sorry. From Davio, a horror story.
A Tale of Two Douches. A GM and a player horror story. Or a GM and a player horror story. It was the best of douche. It was the worst of douche. It was the douche of our discontent. That is...
Congratulations, Davio. You win. You win right now.
This is a story of 2 people who never should have gamed together. Each brought out the exact worst behavior in the other, and the games often turned into pissing matches. One, the GM, who we shall call Jay, and the other was the player, me, much to my shame.
Oh, so this is actually a confession, too.
Yeah, I know. I was totally expecting a my friend D.
We were in a cycle. He would invite me to play in his games, and contrary to my better judgment, I would play in them. He would try to kill my characters, and I would try to weasel out of it and destroy his game on the way out.
Wow.
Damn.
I have much shame for these days, but I kept going under the fallacy, bad gaming is better than none. So this rendition was Champions.
Speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
We had our characters, some of them squeezing the rules to the point of pain and suffering, but
Sounds
legal.
familiar. Yeah, sounds familiar.
Yeah. It was myself, one of the usual suspects, and a 14-year-old kid who joined.
You've scarred that child for life. Just straight up.
Game was going pretty by the number for Jay's game until we got to the end fight. An attack went off, and I aborted to desolidify, and it went right through me, hitting the 14-year-old PCs by mistake.
Oh.
The attack was... Holy hell, it was cheesy. Like summoning Gouda from the elemental plane of cheese. I was born to read this email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jay showed the math and crowed that it was legal, though almost killed the 14-year-old's character in a shot. The kid looked traumatized, like this wasn't what he had signed up for. Jay made the comment, "If you're going to cry, leave so you don't disrupt the game."
Fuck Jay.
Jesus Christ.
Fuck Jay and the horse he rode in on.
Oh, my God.
I felt the red-hot rage of, "That's not right," roar through me. I had tried to play nice, to give the kid a good gaming experience. But no, Jay had the throwdown. All right, it's on.
Oh, no.
Pulling all the stops, I killed one of the villains. Then I beat down 2 of the other villains brutally. One of whom was dying got a 911 call out. When the ambulance showed up, I picked it up.
Okay, hold on a second. They're playing Champions, so they're superheroes. So the bad guys are calling 911? Or are they playing villainous? He doesn't
It sounds like what... That it was like a last ditch, like the dude was dying and just trying to save his life, so he's calling for help.
Okay.
If I had to guess, which I do, since we're all reading the same email,
Right.
I'm gonna say, "Holy shit! Please don't let me die." Would be the impetus there.
Okay.
Also, quite likely, the GM trying to save a villain in order to continue his game.
It could be too.
Makes sense.
Right? So he goes, he just calls 911. I mean, sometimes many villains are on the side of the establishment.
That's true.
Yes, Mr. Luther, we meet again.
When the ambulance showed.
When the ambulance showed up, I picked it up, shook the paramedics out, and then drop-kicked it over the nearby lake.
Okay, I'm now saying that the PCs were the villains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this qualifies now. Like, you've crossed that line into dark territory.
Yeah.
I then took the stunned villain, who had thrown the initial attack, interdimensionally teleported into another realm, and left him there. He took Zod to the Shadow Realm.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
That was the last time I played in Jay's game. Strangely, he did invite me back a few weeks later, but I had had enough. It was enough when he was getting for me, but the kid caught in the crossfire didn't deserve that crap. Moral of the story, play with people you like, and don't get in pissy matches with. Also, rules are guidelines, and you should play nice with each other for a fun story. Davio.
Wow.
If you're going to
I
cry...
feel bad for the 14.
I feel really bad for that kid.
Like, this is years ago, and people I don't know, like, several times removed, and I'm still like, go fuck yourself, Jay. Like, I don't care if you got better. Like, that kid was, no.
We don't even know if he got better. Because the guy stopped playing with him, so we don't know.
I mean...
he might still be, yelling at almost crying 14-year-olds.
Like,
Dude.
and dude it is. It's like, ugh. These are tables where, like, you know that another horror story has been written in about, like, that time he had a girl at the table.
Probably.
Like, GURL.
That's probably true. I don't...
Sorry.
You have the kids playing at your role-playing game table. You got to show them a good time because they're the next generation of gamers, and you just probably pushed one out of the hobby.
Well, and also, like, I remember me at 14, I was so much more socially awkward than I am now, and I'm really socially awkward now. And so, like, I was with a bunch of people older than me that I probably look up to at least a little bit, and then say something like that to you.
Oh, yeah.
Huh. Well, I'm not going to do any of this ever again. Hopefully I'll never see any of you ever again, because...
I mean, definitely that. I'm 100% with you on the, oh, this has happened. Now I shall make sure to pretend that you never exist, and that we never cross paths again in my entire life.
Yes.
Ooh, kind of like how I treat all my ex-relationships.
I once did tell Tappy, I don't cry in front of me because it makes me uncomfortable.
I was so drunk. And I was very upset that I was too drunk to play a show. And that's a completely different situation. I was also almost 14 then, too. So long
No,
ago.
you were over 21.
Barely.
It's pretty much the same thing.
Right, yeah.
Definitely the same thing.
Might as well have been 14.
This is so funny. This is a secondhand story, but an ex of mine used to play in a D&D game, like, with a group of his friends. And they would play, like, every 2 weeks, Mondays, whatever. He came back. His character got killed in the game. Whatever, shit happens.
Right.
So he made up a new character and he went back to the game. And it got killed before he met the party. Somehow. And then his next character died the next session.
Whoa!
Was it a
And I
nice
was
character
like-
bowl of petunias?
Not
Exactly.
again.
And I think the next one after that survived, but he would just come home so pissed off. Like, the one that died before he met the party was because, like, his character was on a ship, and the party was supposed to meet up with the ship, and then something happened, and then something else happened, and, like, some roles were missed.
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made,
that's
and
a
his
GM
character...
failure.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean...
That's totally a GM failure.
like, in your early 20s kind of
Right.
GMing life, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm
Sure, failures happen, but, like...
Oh, sure, I did a lot of stupid shit.
But but I just remember being like, wow, that really sucks. Like, I would have to go somewhere else to laugh? Because he would get real mad?
I
But it was so, like, to hear him describe the whole... Because I would get, like, these, like, 20 to 30-minute stories about it.
It's like in real time.
It just. Oh.
Yeah.
But yes, play with people that you like, and make sure that the people that you like you back.
Even more important. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Davio, for the horror story. Is that it? Are we good?
I think so.
All right. Thank you very much, and we'll close this out. Where's my thing?
Bye!
Oh, no, I'm going to play the old one. Thank you for joining us for Season 26, Episode 8 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
Pooja.
And I'm Tappy.
And we'll see you next week at 7 p.m. Pacific time for another episode. And there's a game on Sunday. What's the game on Sunday? Vampire?
No, didn't we just do Vampire? I think it's Cthulhu.
Cthulhu. Call it Cthulhu. Murmurs at the Abyss on Sunday. I don't think there's a Saturday game. Thank you very much. We'll leave you a song.
Enterprising women with murder on their minds, a devious plan devised. With cold black hearts, each did her part for John Barleycorn's demise. Up! They turned that bastard in jail, both Pepper Brown and Stout. They ground him up and put his bones so fast cup about. And then they stirred in bitter herbs, and when blood ran clear, they turned that bastard Barleycorn to a tankard full of beer.
preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire. Bum, 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 bum.
Why problem make when you no problem have, you don't want to make?